Welcome back to the library. Oh boy. Let me state for the record that I am an extremely fair reviewer and give every game a chance at showing why it's worthy of being on a shelf, regardless of how flawed it is. Usually for a game to not meet the bare minimum average of 5 out of 10, there has to be something fundamentally broken with it. Maybe it's the graphics, maybe it's the control, perhaps the frame rate, or even the cinematics. This may be the first time where it's everything. Largo Winch is a stealth-heavy game based on a TV show that was in itself based on a comic book series. The story's lead is essentially Bruce Wayne without Batman. A young adult loses his stepfather and inherits a billion-dollar company with its hands in pretty much everything. The difference here is that from everything I have read and watched for research doing this episode, Largo only really protects the business. His only concern is his own company, never really the common people. There may be exceptions, as the TV episodes I did watch involved the CIA and a secret society, but when it comes to the PlayStation game, your villains are industrial espionage and hilariously randomized frame rates. Let's rip the band-aid off. At the beginning of the game, you can choose the training mode to get used to the controls. I would highly recommend this, as Largo's fairly clunky. Worse, the game's missing a vital element to his very limited assault capabilities: an aiming function. When using the handgun or the knives, there's no way to aim other than just turning him like rotating a 2x4. Otherwise, his preferred method of attacks are kicks and punches. If buttons are pressed fast enough, he'll perform a 3-hit combo. There's also a block button. In most fights, as long as it's one-on-one, simply holding block till there's an opening is the only skill the player needs. If it's anything more than that, it's usually time to continue. Other than his body, knife, and gun, Largo's only other tool is a radar device. The gimmick here is that Largo cannot use his radar device and attack at the same time. It's a billion-dollar company with an actual espionage division, I'm not even kidding, and no one thought to make it like a wristwatch, or thick glasses, or I don't know, anything. By separating the two, sneaking and transitioning back to combat form is cumbersome and annoying. Thankfully, I don't think this hilarious limitation ever found its way into the scene ever again. Once finished with the training, the real game can be started. It turns out Largo and a reporter are kidnapped by the South American Redemption, SAR. Wait, that's Commando SAR? I thought that was Search and Rescue. Oh, okay, whatever. A little confusing, but we'll move on. So the hero boy and the reporter are tied up and, Largo got himself free with no explanation. Okay, ignoring that, here we can get the feel for the standard levels. Largo can interact with specific items like desks and search them for objects. You can also pick up a select few items and use them on other items in the game. The first real stage is a simple quick fix of a fuse box, finding a radio, and then disarming a bomb. A nice simpler approach so long as you understand the sneaking part of the game. With the bomb deactivated, we can go back and rescue Tanya. Why are we back at headquarters? We never went back to save the reporter. I'll assume she's fine and we saved her off camera. The second stage sees Largo breaking and entering into the Search and South American Redemption headquarters. His excursion finds him hunting for information on the attack on his facility, and more importantly, why SAR, led by a Miss Fritz, wants to buy his newly opened facility so bad. This is where Largo Winch as a game puts itself on full display for the world to see, and it is a living testament to a great many things, none of them good. We'll start with the graphics. At first, they admittedly look pretty good. Characters are large, game areas seem properly scaled, and there's a decent attempt at world building. Guards are researching files, patrols are along the floors, very obvious office floors, and more. This is a corporate entity playing dirty and they clearly must be taken down.
Like Fort Knox.
But then Largo starts moving around and the magic is instantly broken. There's only about 8 textures to an area, infinitely repeated, sometimes to a hilarious degree. Second on the chopping block is the overuse of backtracking. This second stage specifically, you'll start on the bottom floor to work your way up to the third floor, find out you need a passcode on the second floor, go back up to the 3rd floor with said code, then decide to Xerox the documents on a copy machine back on the 2nd floor, then have to return to the 3rd floor, then escape out to the 1st floor from the 3rd floor. Did I mention you have to repeat a laser maze every time? I should point out that this is strictly a stealth mission. If you're spotted once, you have to restart from a checkpoint. This wouldn't be so bad if the gamification of the mission wasn't in play. You see, since the player isn't supposed to be seen, the guard should have no idea there's any danger. Except every time you return to that blasted laser trap room, there's another guard at it each time. I know it's there from a challenge angle, but it breaks the belief that they don't know Largo is there. Once free of that stage, everything else kind of cruises along. Ride an escalator here, disarm a bomb here, run past the same section of a room, wash, rinse, repeat. Things take an odd turn when Largo is captured and sent to the rot in the prison cell of the SAR's oil rig, instead of, I don't know, being murdered, allowing them to do whatever they want afterwards? A wayward guard decides he'll do the deed, calamity ensues, and Largo is once again back in the game. The oil rig is actually a well thought out stage, where stealth is optional but adamant. There are essentially puzzles to solve concerning blocked paths, and there's even a little bit of sense of humor. Turns out that news reporter we never went back for is still in Mrs. Fritz's company and locked away here on the oil rig with you. Convenience! Sadly, technical issues, which will be discussed later, crop in, and if the player isn't wrestling with those, they'll be subdued by multiple guards if you make a simple mistake in the wrong spot. Once this stage is dealt with, it's off to the races as you must quickly chase after the nefarious SAR leader and stop her from making the deal to snatch your facility routing from underneath you. It's at this time that I would like to take a moment to appreciate the situation of this level. In the simplest, purest, non-motivated observation, this is a crazy-haired man frantically running through Amsterdam at midnight, potentially knifing and shooting people to get them out of his way, who then throws a knife at Mrs. Fritz, destroying her phone. Even if you were to somehow justify Largo's actions as self-defense, his path up until this point includes multiple breaking and entering, trespassing, endangerment of a news reporter twice, assaulting airport staff, the potential of murder in several degrees based on your gameplay, and disturbing the peace here in the final act. So what happens? Largo's citizen arrests her. I'm assuming handing over the photocopies he took with the little repercussions that I can't even understand. How is this possible? And my suspension of disbelief is God tier. That subject now covered, we need to go back to the technical problems, because if this is where the game truly, objectively falls off the review scale. I'll completely ignore the low-hanging fruit in the hilariously choppy FMV with their almost Muppet-like iterations of the actors and Game Boy Advance level font. Seriously. There are not one, not two, but potentially 3 softlocks in the game, 2 of which I experienced personally both in the first run of the game. Starting at the airport, once the timer starts to count down, the player is meant to run as fast as possible to Gate 1 from Gate 2. The path is broken up into roughly 3 sections: Gate 2, the hallway, and then the intersection between 1 and 2. The game's engine treats crossing into one section from another as a checkpoint, so if you were to die or run out of time, they would start you at the checkpoint with a predetermined amount of time left on the clock. Our first softlock occurs where, if for any reason once the timer starts, the player crosses from Gate 2 into the hallway and then back into Gate 2, the timer never resets. Instead, on each respawn, it gets shorter and shorter to the point where it just infinitely loops from the dead timer to continue screen and back. The only solution is to reset the system and reload your save, if you saved between levels. The second softlock is a bit more humorous. Back on the oil rig, if Largo is spotted by a guard, the entire floating platform goes into lockdown. Security lights activate and all elevator doors shut down until lockdown is over. If, however, you happen to be in the elevator when a guard sees you, one of 2 things will happen. You can wait it out and just let the door reopen and hope the guard is now facing the other way and walk out, or press the button and go back to the floor above you and then come back down again and hope for the best. Or, as I found out, if you happen to spot 2 guards while in the elevator, one straight ahead and the other to your right, the elevator gets stuck in a loop. It reacts first to the guard you can see, and then just as it begins to reopen, it triggers the second guard seeing you. If the use of the elevator between floors does not reset them, Largo is permanently stuck inside an elevator whose door will not open enough for you to get out. You gotta reset and reload away. This specific lock, where the game stacks the guard reactions in sequence rather than simultaneously, is an issue in the overall programming. If you need to continue and press cross more than once, when the game reloads, Largo will just jump before you can control him. I'm sure there's some sort of hilarity one could do with that knowledge, but I'm not the one to do that video. The third soft lock I was not able to reproduce, but I think it's because I used the cheats. But a writer on GameFAQs shared his tale. Again, on the oil rig, if a sequence of events involving creating a distraction and finding files on a computer are done out of sequence, the game will no longer trigger a required event to happen. It's not really worth trying, either. Largo Winch, as a whole, is one of the strangest oddities I have ever experienced in the PlayStation library. But mainly because it is self-defeating in so many ways. You could improve the graphics, but it means nothing for the clunky gameplay. You could try and improve the gameplay, but it would just make the game insanely easy. Changing anything else only glosses over the whole embarrassing experience. I want to tell you that Largo Winch is a terrible game. To go off like a standard YouTuber and pronounce the worst game ever made, complete with that annoying yellow text and red arrow. But to call it that implies it at least succeeded at something, being a failure. But it goes far beyond that. Even being a budget title can't even eke out a sympathy point. On the library review scale, Largo Winch is our first and hopefully last broken score 1 out of 10. When the only thing that could save it would be fixing everything, it's time to give up the family business. And there you go, guys. I cannot properly put into words how insane this game really was when it came to its problems. Like, I played through Animorph 6 times trying to figure out a possible code, and I played through The Crow like 3 times to re-review it. I don't ever want to go back to Largo Winch. Like, you just, the soft locks alone, like, to get 2 of them on the first run, it's broken. It was clearly a budget title, but like, and I think there were like 6 game testers on this. Like, you could tell they just didn't care and they rushed it out. Most of the money probably went in the licensing. But yeah, I cannot believe we got our first 1 out of 10. Like, I really thought Alone in the Dark 2 was the bottom of the barrel, but here we are. If you guys have played this, comment in the comment section below. Let's discuss the insanity. I will see you guys later. Have a good one.